Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Sauer. I'm the Assistant Director here at Magna Career Center, the counselor for the School of Vision Media and Performing Arts. And I was very interested in being able to host this workshop today, this career panel, with alumni from various writing careers. And again, if you are interested in writing and you're interested in exploring, we have five really fantastic alumni that are joining us today to talk about their particular career paths. So each of our speakers are going to have a few minutes to talk about their careers. We have questions that we're going to ask them. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat. The goal of this career panel is to make an informed decision about writing careers. Like I said, if you have this passion for writing, this is a great opportunity for you to learn more about what you can do. Could you follow the same path as some of our alumni and more? So we're going to jump right in. So first things first, I want to introduce Avi Wiswer. I'm going to put him on Spotlight. Avi is one of our he's our intern at Magna Center. He's doing our social media, so he'll be asking some questions today. All right, Candace Mitchell. Candace Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you. You are someone who wears a lot of hats. I knew you when you were a student, and you do screenwriting. You've done copywriting. You're currently doing some casting, you said.
Yes.
So I think everybody's going to want to know more about you and your career path. So let's just get started. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you work, where you have worked, and what inspired you to work in writing.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Candace Mitchell, and I technically graduated um, just on New Year's Eve 2021, but my ceremony was last spring. And the way I got my start was I was originally a theater major, but when the professor was telling us about like the open call, like the 6 a.m. auditions, I was like, this isn't for me. This is not my path. I'm going to figure out how words work and do that. So, the way I got into writing was like I've always been writing. I was always writing like poetry, but I always had a passion for writing for television. Um, and just from the shows I watched. And so what I was doing was I was very much interested in writing comedy. So I started taking classes at like the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, the People's Improv Theater, and with screenwriting, came back to school to finish at Brooklyn College just to have that discipline to write long form. And since then, I was working in production. I was doing internships with a production company, and just getting that experience is what led me to get other gigs. So that's how I just kept working, and whoever wanted to work with me, and just having that openness to be versatile to what was available at the time is what allowed me to navigate different pathways to be a writer.
It's not only what you know, it's who you know. So the networking part was super important.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
The more experiences that you have as well. And especially as a writer, the more experiences that you have lent to your writing ability and things like that as well, correct?
Oh yeah, definitely. Essentially, like even when I started writing, it's a discipline. It's not easy just to wake up and be like, I just want to write 30 pages of a screenplay. It's like you need that tool and that skill of honing your skill, and also realizing like the first things that you're going to write are going to be bad. Like, so you just have to stick with it. It may not be great, but it's what's going to lead your work to be great. So sticking with that, and just learning to just adapt my style, and just study also other people's writing styles so I can see what I was doing, and then looking at other people who knew more and that were better, who could help me improve.
Yeah, I mean that's really great. And that goes to my next question, which is, again, being a screenwriter, you've done UX writing, which is user experience, um, copywriting, and more. How have you been able to adapt to the different roles that you've had?
Well, I take comfort in that each different industry has a different writing style and a different format. So screenwriting is a long form work. So like a pilot would be 30 to 35 pages. Copywriting, especially particularly for social media, is different. It's tight, it's quippy. You've seen if you go on anyone's social media, their captions are like super short, like one sentence, two sentence. So I took comfort in that. That just those changes that allowed me to also hone my voice and be more flexible and versatile for whichever industry I was writing for.
Right. And just knowing that each one of them have their own, like you said, their own kind of style, their own kind of structure, right, is very important. So as a writer, your adaptability, versatility is a word that you used before. These are all words that everybody here, if you all are aspiring writers, must consider. Please consider that the idea of being versatile. Me myself, when I graduated Brooklyn College, I wanted to be just a screenwriter. But then when I branched out to doing other things, social media and graphic novels and other things like that, novels, I was able to kind of learn more in terms of the versatility of a writer that I can be, right? So, um, and Candace, did you have an interest in all of these areas originally, or again, were you just screenwriting, or what was the original?
The original goal was to write for scripted television, to be in a writer's room. And as we see how this year has been panning out with the writer's strike, I think it also serves to realize that, you can't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
It's that I think also goes into like just not being precious and just keeping that open mind. Um, the first real writing job I got was last spring, was when I was working. My title was an associate producer, but I was strictly an AP as a writer. So I was revising their story Bibles, I was helping with their episode structure. And when I was hired, my resume showed, like my interest in writing for scripted TV. And the executive producer let me know that this is an unscripted show. Are you interested in writing for a reality competition series? Like, there is no final draft. There is no, it's not the same as like writing for the WB. And I was like, yeah, I just wanted to write. I wanted to get paid and have that body of work to show that I am a writer and I can do this industry. And because of that adaptability, it's how I've been able to continue working in this field.
And building your portfolio of work. And again, yeah, it speaks on your resume about being somebody that can work cross-platform, I guess you could call it. Would that be a good,
Yeah,
is
I
it
would.
scripted, non-scripted, social?
Yes, definitely. And also, even within scripted and unscripted, there are different genres within that. Some people want comedy writers, dramatic writers, fiction, nonfiction. So there's so many different avenues to explore, but also finding what goes well with your voice. Essentially, like I'm a comedy writer, so I was working for Comedy Central, so that also helped. What I'm doing now for Rhythm and Flow, I don't have a background in music and I don't have a background in competition, but I know how to write. I'm a good writer and I understand tone. So those type of skills is what it's kind of been that thread that's keeping me connected and still keeping me, fingers crossed, still employed.
Yeah. How was your experience at Comedy Central? I mean, again, looking at your LinkedIn, there's so many things here: editing, copy editing, proposal writing, which is pitching, copywriting. What are your thoughts on that experience?
It was good. It really was. I felt very like prepared for it. I think because I've been doing it for so long. Also, even though I graduated, I guess technically last year, my path, even my college path is not linear. Like I originally had enrolled freshman year was for me like 2010, 2011. I had a break before I finished my degree. So getting my degree was the cherry on top. But before that, I was still preparing. I was still like taking comedy classes. I took it upon myself to find different avenues to hone my skill as a writer. Um, so when I got the opportunity to get this job, I felt right at home. I had a very strong and still have a strong skill of comedy, what to look for in comedians, episode structure. I had went and like read a bunch of like Save the Cat books, all different types of like just did a lot of like self work to learn television formatting. So when I got the job, I felt super prepared.
Great. That's great. Avi has some questions for you as well.
With these various roles that you've taken on and with everything that you've been doing, what are some daily challenges that you've faced in your career?
I think the challenge that I faced in my career is constantly showing that my diverse writing skills are transferable to the next job. So even just the Comedy Central job that I had last spring up until the end of last year, my title was an associate producer, but it wasn't a writer. So when I got the copywriting job, I'm not sure if they had, I don't know, but there could have been some hesitation of being like, well, my title isn't copywriter. How can you be a copywriter if you've never, had that job? But luckily I had gotten that job because I had a friend who worked there who could vouch for me, and I still had my body of work. I think keeping that portfolio of like all the things I've done, I've written for Funny or Die. I also wrote humor articles when I was still in school. So I had kept building a body of work to show that I can write copy and I understand entertainment, and just having that skill, my prior skills just is more of an asset, rather than something to kind of side eye.
And my last question is, what kind of advice would you have for students in writing within these various roles?
I'd say be open-minded and don't be precious with your words. Especially if you're writing for a client, you have to tend to the client. It's what they want, not what you want for them. And I've seen people who have taken their words or their feedback too personally, and that had them lose a job because of it. So you have to understand, if you're working for an employer or a client, you tend to them. Another thing I would say is you are the company you keep. If you're a writer, you should try to have friends who are also writers, who are also in that same group. After I graduated, I still kept friends who were in my film classes, and we had an accountability group. To this day, we still meet up every other week, and it helps keep us on track with the creative projects that we start and make sure that we finish. And get started. If you want to write, if you're a humor comedy writer, try to find online sites that you can like write jokes for, even if it's like, I got my start when I was writing, got $10 a joke. It really was for Funny or Die, and it was $10 a joke. And still that $10 meant everything, because it meant my words got published on their site and I could say that I had a Funny or Die credit. So that's what I would say.
This is all really great advice and a lot of really great insight to these particular options as a writer. Again, what do we learn here? It's about versatility. It's about being able to be adaptable. It's who's in your network. It's who's in your network. It's not only what you know, it's who you know. So that's very important. We have an event coming up later in November, mid-November. It's called Mentor Day, November 14th. So I could talk more about that as we go on. But that's a student's opportunity to meet with alumni like Candace and like many of the others that are here today to share advice about their particular career path. I have two questions for you, Candace. One, just as you were talking, one of the things I was thinking about is, do you ever deal with writer's block at all, or do you ever run into like a roadblock or something that kind of gets you stuck? And if that's the case, how do you get past it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I realize if I get writer's block, I'm too close to the project. So I'll put final draft away, I'll take a break from my computer, and I'll do something. I kind of like will pick up a hobby. I'll either go for a walk, or I'll end up just getting away from it. I'll either go to like a comedy show. I'll either go to like watch improvisers. I also get a lot of inspiration watching improv shows because they're just done on the spot. So I find other ways to get out of my own head, get out of myself, and then just do something out of my comfort zone just to have new ideas generating. And so when I get back to it, then I can see, oh, okay, this is where, this whatever was lacking, it's not lacking anymore. I can add to it and build off of it.
That's great. Avi, I think Avi has a question as well, a follow-up.
Yeah, so you spoke about doing the different comic strips or not comic strips, the comedic strips for $10. How important would you say that it is to go the extra mile to basically show how committed you are to a company and maybe do things that would kind of help you advance your career? I would want to know how important you think that is.
I don't know if it's necessarily being committed to the client, but it's just having that awareness that you're writing for the client. An example I can use was is when I was a copywriter for Cashmere Agency this past spring up until like a couple weeks ago, just a few weeks ago. And I was handling the socials for BET Plus, and for their rollout for their shows, Sisters and All the Queen's Men. I don't watch those shows, but the client had very clear specific details on who their audience was, what their tone was, and what they wanted to generate from their social media. So I did my own research. I looked at their socials, looked at the tone that they had for previous seasons, and it's pretty much marrying my voice to what the established tone of their show already was. So I wouldn't say I'm going the extra mile, but I'm just making sure that, the client is getting what they need, and making sure that, it's a good relationship both ways with my creativity and just them getting what they need. So that way their rollout's really good.
Right, it's adaptability, right? It's adaptability to what their needs are, and then you being flexible to do so, right? So you being able to kind of give them what it is that they want. Again, writing is a really tremendous talent, and I've been doing this job for 20 years, working with students' resumes and cover letters, and a lot of people struggle with writing, and I understand that. But I think for us that know how to write and really are passionate about writing, it is really an amazing skill to be a wordsmith and somebody that can really describe things and engage people, right? So we have a few minutes for questions. So if anybody has any questions, put it in the chat. So there's one question here, Candace, from Grasley, who is asking, should I continue college or get a degree to become a writer? Currently, I'm mainly interested in fiction and fantasy writing and have interest in screenwriting and novel writing. This interest has also been a more recent realization, so I don't have that much experience in the field right now. I've been browsing the internet to learn more about it, but would you say that is enough? Do I need school to become a successful writer? It's a long question, but we get what you're saying for sure.
Okay, I wouldn't say whether you should or should not go to school, but I've also, I should say, when I have not been in school, it wasn't because I chose I didn't want to finish my degree. I had a family emergency that forced me to withdraw from school. When I wasn't in school, I felt like it wasn't going to be possible. I was like, okay, I kind of honestly forgot my dream and just got a job and was doing the 9 to 5. And then once, I don't know, once I got my first real job and I was able to save up money, the first thing I wanted to do was I'm going to save up and get my degree, because I know I couldn't have written a screenplay if I didn't finish my degree. Like, I needed that discipline. I can do a half hour, but a whole 90-minute thing, no, you can kiss me through the phone. I'm not doing it. So that's a personal thing. You have to just know whether or not it's worth it. But I think in terms of networking, getting an internship, because when I went back to school, I was in my late 20s. I think it was almost 30. Going back and getting my internship helped me a lot. It helped me a great deal. That networking is so important. And sometimes the only way you can get into those networks is through college, is through school. Mike helped me with my resume when I got my first production internship. And that's really how I've been able to continue working. So you'd have to do a self-check-in to see if you want to go stay in school or withdraw. But I can only tell you that it's benefited me a great deal.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And again, it's opportunity, right? If you're in college, you have opportunity to be on panels like this and network with individuals, and then even learning from other people as well. Everybody wants to be like perfect right off the bat. It's like sometimes we have to work towards our craft. Sometimes we have to like learn and then explore based on what other people are saying. So it's a very good point. We've got time for about 2 questions, maybe 3. We have a question here. Jonathan, are there any tips for students or recent grads that will help them stand out against their competitors when searching for roles in copywriting? Are there any specific skills or courses they should partake in? More for one.
I'm not sure. I couldn't give you any tips on courses, but I would say continue networking. I would I guess some people would say Facebook is a little outdated, but I met a lot of people through Facebook groups. I also still am good friends, like I said, with people who are in my film classes, and we keep an accountability group. Um, and it just depends on what type of writer you are. If you are a humor writer, if you are, you know, a dramatic writer, try to find the channels that are aligned with the genre that you write. For me, what I did was I had taken improv and sketch comedy classes at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, and I had met a lot of friends and networked there. And pretty much just keeping that network, people would let you know, oh, like a certain show is looking for packets. Even if I didn't get the show, I would still take the opportunity to write a packet to help strengthen my skill. So I would just say it's worth networking. Networking is really everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's another question. If Maya's asking, if I have an idea for a pilot TV series, what would be a realistic way to go about pitching that? Who should I look to pitch that to?
What I would say for that is make a list and write down the shows that you like to watch. And then when you look at those shows, read the credits. Read who created it, who wrote on it, who is the producer, and look at the production companies. Because usually if you want to pitch, if it's a certain show, usually whatever you're inspired by is based off the content you're already consuming. So if you're gonna watch shows that you already like, look up those production companies. And I would say that should be the avenue you go in. Also, if you're pitching a show, do you have representation? That's another thing also. A lot of networks aren't going to see you if you don't have an agent or a manager repping you on your behalf. I would also say before you even do that, before you even try to pitch it, I would say get feedback on it. Submit it to like the blacklist. Pay people to read it, give you proper like reviews on where the strengths and weaknesses are, where you can improve, and prepare a pitch deck. But yeah, that's a long road to do that.
It's all very good advice and things that everyone should consider. So this is really great. We're out of time now. There are some more questions in the chat, Candace. I don't know if you have a few minutes maybe to address those if you do have time. But can students overall stay in touch with you? Could they add you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, you can add me on LinkedIn. It's just my first and last name.
Okay. We can share your LinkedIn here, and if anybody has any questions, Candace can chat with you, or you could send the questions to me, and I'll share with Candace too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Candace, thank you so much for your time. This is really great. I'm glad that you were able to come and chat with students and share some advice about your career path. And again, you wear so many different hats. It's really great to understand how you go about it. And again, the adaptability, versatility, and who's in your network are probably the most important things that students should consider.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for having me. I really hope I was able to help someone out there.
You definitely will. You definitely are. You definitely just being here and sharing advice is fantastic. So thank you so much.
Of course. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Our next guest is Derek Norman, who is from the New York Times. So Derek, Senior News Assistant, International Desk at the New York Times. Derek, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, everybody.
All right. Again, this is a great opportunity for everyone here to kind of learn a little bit more about our alumni, people that are in their writing careers. So we're going to jump right into it. So Derek, if you could introduce yourself, where you work, and what inspired you to pursue a career in writing.
So I'm at the New York Times. I've been here for about 6 years in different roles and capacities. I graduated from Brooklyn College in 2017. I majored in journalism when there was a print journalism department. I think it's evolved a little bit since then. And while I was at Brooklyn College, I was the managing news editor for the campus newspaper, The Kingsman, which I believe has merged with the second newspaper and is now the Vanguard.
Right. The Vanguard now, which again, a great opportunity for students on campus. You have an interest in writing, you should definitely be writing for the Vanguard. Derek has done that. Avi actually writes for the Vanguard now. Allison Rapp, who's an alum that's going to chat with us today, was part of the Vanguard. Definitely a great and amazing resume builder, right? So being able to kind of get into that kind of flow of writing. So in terms of questions, what do you think are the most important skills to be a successful journalist in your experience?
So I think there's about three major components to writing, and I'm talking through the lens of journalism, but I think the writing aspects kind of translate across the board to any kind of platform or medium. So that would be reporting and research. That's the first part of the process. Then the actual writing that you do, and then the third part is the editing process. All equally important, but I think prioritizing the reporting and the research that you're doing before you write is invaluable. Because I mean, if you get as much information as possible, over report it, you have too much information, too much scene, too much quotes, too many fine details, no matter how specific or minute they are. When you actually go to sit down and write whatever you're writing, it's all there for you. You don't have to go back. And it's easy to leave that on the cutting room floor and have it and not use it than to wish that you had it. So I think really prioritizing the reporting is important. Then when it comes to writing, I think once you have all of that reporting, the writing comes easily. And then you have more of the brain space to kind of focus on how you're writing, the style, the format, what you're going to include in the piece, the quotes that you can choose to use. And also with a lot of rich reporting, it makes it easier so that you can say things yourself and save the really strong quotes for your story. So instead of quoting, like if there's some major fire, instead of having a fire official saying there was a blaze that happened at 3:30 p.m., said the fire official, you can say that, but then have a really strong quote from him saying, or her saying, this was one of the worst fires I've ever seen, And then the third part is the editing process. And I think it's super important because it's the first time that someone else will look at your writing and you'll have an outside perspective on it. They'll be able to look at it and say, this is what you're missing. I think you should focus on this a little bit more and cut this out of it. And it's kind of like, it kind of puts you in the frame of how a reader is going to be reading my writing. Your audience, how's your audience going to be reading it? And then humbling yourself and working with the editor is that last bit of the process.
Again, adaptability, right? Being open to constructive feedback, or even if they use the word constructive criticism, it's still all meant to make you a stronger writer, right? So, and the other thing too that you mentioned about the reporting and the research and the editing, all those are all industry terminology. All that should be mentioned, right, in your resume and cover letter, even in your interview process as well, right? What are your thoughts on that, Derek?
Yeah, I think if you're interviewing for a writing job, if you can somehow weave into the interview how you work with an editor or how it's like you've collaborated to get the piece of writing, even if your name is on it, it shows that you see the writing. It's your ego is kind of removed from it, and the writing is what you're selling. It's what you're bringing to the table. So even if you're describing a piece that you worked on, instead of saying, I did this, I did this, I did this, you could say, I did this, then we did this, and this is what we have. And I think an interviewer would respond well to that. I think they would see that, we can work well with this.
The collaborative process. Yeah, I think that's
because it very, very much is.
Right. Yeah. Avi, you have some questions.
Yeah, as deadlines can create anxiety and can be incredibly overwhelming, especially as you work for the New York Times. How do you deal with deadlines and how do you go about it?
Well, it depends on what I mean, I've done a lot of feature writing, which, you might have a few weeks to work on something and you have a little more breathing room. And then I've done breaking news where it has to get turned around in a day. And I've done now live coverage, which you do the reporting, you write, and it gets published as it gets edited and then published as soon as possible. And all three of them are very different. But when I'm on a hard deadline, I try to, again, I think the most important thing is to make sure that your reporting is all there, because someone is going to ask questions about what you have to say. And if you have all of the answers right in front of you, then it just makes the whole process easier. When I'm doing feature writing, I am a hardcore procrastinator. Everything I do in my life, I do at the very last minute. But I try my hardest, even if I have an assignment and I'm writing a 1,000-word article and the deadline's not for 3 weeks. If I do all of the reporting today, I try to write. My process also is I sit down and write in one sitting. I don't write a bit here and then go to sleep and then the next day write a little bit more. No matter what, I like to go to bed early and then wake up very early. And then right when I wake up and my mind is sharp and it's the early morning and the day hasn't gotten started, I sit down and I write everything. And then I go back to it and then I'll reread it and revise and tweak it how I want to tweak it. But I think that it's important to, even if you have a long deadline, to write it immediately, because everything that you had just reported is fresh in your head. You're remembering how a person reacted when you asked them a question. You're remembering that, their expressions. You're remembering what the scene felt like, what you smelled, what you saw, what you heard in that moment. And all of those details are what makes great writing. I think this is true for journalism, that you want to be as simple, direct, and straightforward as you can. Feature writing, you have a little more liberty to kind of, flower up your writing. But the best writing, what I like to do, and the best writers that I read, they let the details write for them. And I think that's a fantastic, if you can keep that tip in your head when you're writing, your writing will come out in a much better way. The details often describe what we as writers try to describe ourselves. And if we can let the details of what we're writing about do the work for us, then you're in a much better place. And I think your writing comes off, much better, if that makes sense.
It does. I want to just add something to that about the writing process and what gets you in the mode to write and being able to do that early. And I think everyone here is probably going to have their own process, or maybe they're looking for a good process. Like, I agree, like, me writing early morning is probably the best, not midday, because then who knows what you're going to be doing next during the day, right? So the early morning definitely works for sure. Avi, there's another question, and if anybody has any questions, put them in the chat and we'll try to get to those as well.
So my next question is, can you describe a time when you had to adapt to a new technology or tool for reporting and publishing, as we have AI now, social media? How were you able to handle that transition? And was there any feelings going towards that?
There's a few examples of maybe what I do now that I'm not sure if I can talk on it. Maybe it seems in journalism there's a lot of live coverage now where people are doing like live briefings and you see reporter updates on this story or that story. And the first time I've done a few of them, but then when the Black Lives Matter demonstrations were popping up all over New York City after George Floyd was killed, I was one of the reporters out on the street reporting on it. And it was a live briefing, so it was constantly feeding an already published news article. And it was really just about capturing the news as it happened. And I had to learn how to do that on the ground while reporting. And the strategy that it was just, I just took every kind of tool in my toolkit that I use normally and just put it into hard overdrive, looking for the stories, looking for what's important, looking for the news, looking for the context, and just doing it as quickly as possible. if that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Yeah. Again, goes back to adaptability as well and things like that. Now here, there are a couple other questions. We have some questions in the chat. Jason Richter, right, has asked, Derek, do you have any memorable stories that you've worked on that is your go-to example when people ask why you do what you do?
That's a tough question. Maybe, I mean, two quick examples, maybe. Well, when I was working on the New York City desk a few years ago, there was an undocumented immigrant who was working on a construction site, I think in the Bronx, and the site was unsafe and it collapsed and killed him, and that was the story. So that could be done as just the news story, you know, it goes up in 700 words and then you say what happened and then move on. But we went really deep on this, and we took that, and I think this is a good practice for writing and thinking about the bigger picture, the bigger thought, and we did a deep dive into what happened on this construction site, what happened to him, what led to it. Who was he? How is his family? How did he get here? We looked at, and then we kind of pulled back and looked at construction in New York City. What laws are in place in New York City? What protections are there for undocumented immigrant workers? What is the city doing to combat these unsafe work sites? And kind of pulled that all together in one story. That's a specific example. And I believe that that person, the company on the site, was charged. I don't remember what happened after that, but they were eventually charged with his death. And but taking a singular event or story and then kind of looking at it, you know, stepping back and looking at what it really means in kind of like the structure that we live in our society, I think it could be powerful and it could make a difference.
That's great. Yeah, all things to consider when you're thinking about these various careers. We have time for maybe two questions, maybe three. So the next question is from Jonathan. Jonathan has a two-part question, but the first part I think was kind of covered already. The second part is, are there any challenges that you face when it comes to writing and finding credible sources in that whole process, right?
Well, you just vet the people that you're talking to. And if you're working news, more than one source is a rule. So you just have that. I mean, you just need to verify it through as many ways as you possibly can.
Right. Yeah, the vetting process, super important, and understanding who your sources are and more. In terms of writing, I mean, have you always been inspired to be a writer, and did that just morphed into the journalism? You may have touched upon this before, but maybe, I don't know if you want to reiterate or touch upon something that you hadn't mentioned before.
No, I moved to New York City because I grew up in Connecticut, and I moved to New York City because I wanted to be a firefighter. And I thought, if I'm going to be a firefighter, I'm going to do it in a city where there's actual fires to be put out and people that need to be helped instead of some suburban town, you know. So I moved to New York. I enrolled in a CUNY community college, waiting because I didn't realize that the hiring process for the FDNY took years. And then I got my associates, and then I was still waiting for the application process. So I went to Brooklyn College to get my bachelor's, and I had to choose a major. I've loved writing. I loved reading and writing. And some people suggested, why don't you try journalism? And so I just chose that as a major, and I found it exciting, and I loved everything about it. So then I started writing for the campus newspaper, which I think is fantastic. I mean, it gave me everything that I needed to explore my writing skills and what I wanted to do. Because if you think, like, I know we're just talking about hard news here, but you can kind of use that newspaper or any publication as a vehicle to explore your interests. I mean, if you want to be a screenwriter, if you want to be a novelist, or you're interested in pop culture or music or art, there are publications for all of that. And you don't have to want to be a journalist, but I would suggest to everybody here to get started in writing if you don't know how to, and to build experience, find a publication that is kind of focused on what you're interested in and pitch some stories there. It'll give you clips, so you'll get published stuff that you can bring to the table, and you'll start building a portfolio, and then you can practice your own writing and develop it now,
That's a great point. And the Vanguard is a great place to start. And again, I talked to Avi about it, and he went on to, now he's doing the sports editorials there, right, Avi? And I think there's one more question, Avi, if you want to ask that as well.
Yeah. So there's a question from, sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong, OG. He asks, how do you stay completely up to date with current events and news trends?
I don't think that's possible. But I guess it's just kind of, we have some in journalism, there's different types of reporters. There's general assignment reporters, which cover everything. And then there's beat reporters, and having a beat means you're one person that covers transportation in New York City, or you cover sports, or you cover a basketball specifically. And so I think it's much more manageable to have a focus and stay on top of that. Whether it's like international news or politics, and anything really, but just focusing it in on a specific area or field is the best way to do that.
Do you have any final advice for students? Anybody that's interested in pursuing journalism or even applying to the New York Times? Any final advice on that?
I think just writing is the most important. It's simple and it seems ridiculous, but just start writing, even if it's for yourself. That's the way you build confidence and a commanding voice in your writing. It's how you start to learn to pick, when you're out in the street, think about the scene that you're in and just start picking it apart in your brain. If you're waiting at a food truck and your food's it's going to take 10 minutes for your food to come out, just start writing in your own brain about what's going on. What details are you seeing? What strikes you most about that scene? What pops out at you? And if you start to train your brain to think like that, to become more observant, that will ultimately translate onto the page when you start writing. So I think practically, it's just try to write as much as possible. And I know it's difficult to say because it's just hard to find outlets and ways to do that. But like pitching to publications that you think would accept your work is a great start. Anywhere, hyperlocal publications, there's plenty in New York City. So
a good point what you said about writing and always writing continuously to write, right? Because it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more that you feel good about it, right? So thank you so much for your time today. This is really great. A lot of really great advice and insight into what you do. And I hope this inspires others here to obviously continue to write, explore journalism, but maybe even writing for the Vanguard. And I'm always pitching that to students. Think about that. It's a great outlet. It's here on campus. We can add it to your resume. It's going to be great. So thank you so much, Derek, for your time today. Can students stay in touch with you through LinkedIn or?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, so we have our next speaker, Helen Phillips. Thank you so much for joining us today. Helen, you are a novelist, published book author, and associate professor here at Brooklyn College. So thank you for your time.
Yes, of course. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Michael and the Magner Career Center, for having me. I'm very grateful for what Magner does for our students. Also, thank you to Candace and Derek. It was really interesting to hear what they had to say, and I agree with so much of what they said about making a life in writing. Also, thank you to my students who came today. I'll give you extra credit for attending the panel.
That's good.
Yes. So I got my MFA in fiction writing here at Brooklyn College in 2007. And I have my 6th book of fiction. Here it is. It's coming out in August 2024. And as Michael said, I'm an associate professor at Brooklyn College, which is admittedly the best job on the face of the earth. So I feel very lucky to be doing what I'm doing at this institution. So you asked the question, what inspired me to be a writer? And I have to admit that from the age of 6, like as soon as I could write down stories and tell stories. It was what I wanted to do. And actually making the choice to do that and to devote my life to that, it's a long road, but I knew it from a very young age that this was like a calling or a vocation for me.
That's really great. And again, just being able to pursue that, right? That talent and that passion for writing. So how long does it take you to write a book? I mean, you have this new book coming up, but how long does it take typically, you think?
Well, is there a global pandemic?
So, perfect time, right? Yeah.
It takes a long time, a very long time. I would say 3 to 8 years for each of my books, but it's not a linear process. So I might write a first draft and then I work on something else for 6 months and then I return to it. And my book, The Beautiful Bureaucrat, that was probably 8 years from the first draft to the final draft. A lot of times I'll write a draft that's twice as long as the final. And then a lot of my writing process will actually be cutting the book in half of the, cutting the length in half. So I don't know a good answer to that question. I think another answer is it takes your entire life. Like every book I write is sort of the culmination of every feeling and experience that I have had.
In terms of the writing process, because Derek had mentioned writing for him in the morning was really a major factor. Do you have something that's similar in terms of your writing practice?
I do. And I think that a big part of being a writer is figuring out what practice works for you. So for me, it is having a regular set amount of time, but I want to qualify that because I believe in daily writing, but I also believe in the fact that we have complicated lives. So I have a pretty committed daily writing practice, but the amount of time varies a lot. So like after I had my first child, for the first month I didn't write, to be fair, but then I started writing just 15 minutes a day. That was a time in my life when 15 minutes was a daily commitment I would make. And if I was able to do the 15 minutes, I would count that as a success. At other times in my life over the summer, it might be 4 hours a day or even 6 hours a day. So whatever is going on in my life, I set an amount of time that's realistic that I can do. And then I show up very diligently for that after I've made a realistic goal. That said, I do think some people are best if they write only once a week in a huge burst. Some people might prefer to take a whole weekend. So I do think there are other ways, but my preference is to write in the morning and for a set amount of time each day.
Right, scheduling that time, because again, like you said, I mean, we have lives, we have things that we have to do. And just carving out that time, and I think that's just super important. And then consistency too, right? I mean, it's almost like you are building that confidence in yourself that you're going to get to these set of pages, let's say, and it's the consistency part.
Yeah, the consistency for me is really important because if I go a long time without writing, then there's so much pressure on the writing. Whereas if I'm writing every day, it's like, okay, I had a bad day of writing, I'll try again tomorrow. Rather than, oh, I haven't written in a long time, I better sit down and write the best short story ever written. I've been slacking off. So just the regularity just keeps it a little bit low key in a way that it feels playful, that it feels like, okay, I played today, I set aside the time. And I'm flexible with myself about how I use that writing time to some extent. So if I need to fill myself up, I might use that to read. So I would use my writing time to read something. Or today I am using my writing time to go and see my colleague Ben Lerner, who's speaking in the library right after this panel. So I gave up my writing hour because I'm going to go and see a great writer speak about their work. So I have an amount of time every day that I devote to this thing that I'm doing, but that can take different forms.
Right. It's good to know. Avi, you have some questions as well.
Hi,
Hi, how you doing? So my first question is, as somebody who is interested in writing their own book someday, what do you say is the most difficult part about writing a book?
I think a book is the highest form of a human using their intellect and creativity and emotion and psychology. So I think that it's all really hard. But I think that probably the hardest thing is just, it takes so long. And you will get really discouraged at times in that process. You will. I don't think there's any way to work on a project for 5 years and not have moments where you're really in the woods and feel like you have no idea what you're doing and the world will never care about this. You aren't communicating well. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what your plot is. The dialogue is terrible. You know, there are so many moments of self-doubt. And so I don't think that writing gets easier as you become, you know, my 6th book is as hard to write as my 1st book. It's always the blank page. It's always you trying to rise to some ideal in your mind and falling short. But what does get easier over time is when I have those dark feelings of self-doubt, I'm familiar with them. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is the part of the process where I feel like I'm worthless and then this project sucks. And that is okay. And so just being like, I feel that way now. This is part of the process. This is how I know I'm doing it. So I think that that's the hardest part. And the other hardest part is connected to what we were talking about before, because it takes a lot of time and energy to make a book. And you don't get paid for writing fiction until you're really, really far along in doing a project, if at all. So for the first book, my first book that was published was a collection of stories that are all exactly 340 words. So I gave myself that challenge to write these microfictions. Before that book, I had written 3 full-length novels, which I threw away. My first book that was published by a tiny press, and my advance for the book was $1,000. So I was very excited to have a book published, but just in terms of the finances of it, I had spent years of my life first writing 3 novels that I threw away, then finally writing a book that I got paid $1,000 for. So of course, a really important part of the picture of being a fiction writer is that you have to have a day job. And so any of you out there who want to be fiction writers, just accept off the bat, obviously, that your payday, if it ever comes, will be in a really long time. So in the meantime, figuring out what is a job that you can do that maybe that you love, but a job that will pay the bills and also leave you enough mental energy to do what you love to do. And so when I'm talking to my students who want to be writers, a lot of what I say is, okay, let's talk practically. How are you going to pay the bills while you work on the Great American Novel? I know that you can write this novel. I'm excited for you, but it's not a financially positive situation for a really long time. So I just want to be realistic with people about that.
And if I could just add to that, I mean, again, being able to balance that, the job, and then having enough, I love how you said that, which is that that mental energy, right, to then write. Absolutely, that is super, super important to this whole process, to have the day job, have the income come in, but then be able to create also. Very important in this whole process. Avi, you had 1 or 2 other questions, I think, and we have some questions in the chat. If you guys have any questions, please put it there.
So writer's block is something that inevitably happens throughout your writing career. Is there any kind of, I know some writers maybe meditate, they journal. What are some daily practices that you embark on that helps you kind of get out of that writer's rut or the creative block?
Well, I loved what Candace said about that writer's block for her is a symptom of being too close to the project, and taking a walk or watching a show that you love or just doing something different can be a good way to get through that. Although I will be honest, I don't experience a ton of writer's block in my life and at this point, and I think that that's because my writing practice, I'm very non-judgmental with myself. I'm judgmental of myself that I have to have a practice, like a set amount of time. But within that time, I'm flexible with myself. And if what I need to do is type up the dream I had last night and just let my fingers move over the keyboard, even though no one cares, you know, who wants to know about my dream. But I'm very open to kind of whatever comes. And I also, I always keep a running list of ideas that I have. So if I'm sitting down to write for that day and I don't know what I want to do, I have pages and pages that I can look to. So I do try to keep track of those thoughts that go through my head and just, you know, keep them in my back pocket.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
And to be clear, I think that a lot of times writer's block is a symptom of pressure. Like you get writer's block when you feel like you have to do something amazing right away. So I think a lot of my practice is oriented against removing pressure and introducing playfulness. So that's why I set, rather than saying I have to write 500 words a day, I say I have to write for an hour a day. Because as soon as I'm saying 500 words, I'm demanding a specific product. But if I just say an hour a day, the success is I always put my timer on, and whatever happens in that time, I accept what that is. And I give, my students can attest to this, I give them some really ridiculous assignments, like an assignment where we all pass, everybody adds one sentence to a nonsensical story that's going around, and people are laughing and people are being dumb and adding stupid things to the story. And I tell them at the end, the reason I want you to do this is because this state of being a little bit silly and a little bit chaotic is the ideal creative state. Although I think when we come to writing, it's like, I better be serious, I better be smart, I better do something great. And so I think it's that actually leads to writer's block. So playfulness and removing pressure, I think, is helpful for writer's block as well.
That is amazing advice, and absolutely something that everyone should consider, because I've had writer's block, and when I really thought about it, it's exactly what you said, which is the pressure. You're putting pressure and demand on yourself, and you're not making it a fun process. So I love that idea that just say it's just an hour, write an hour. I think that's really great. Everyone, please should take that to heart. So we do have some questions here. Jason's asking, can you talk about how you first got published and first got an agent?
Yes, I think that's very important for fiction writers to know, because your agent, having an agent, is a pathway to accessing the big five publishers. Not so much for small presses, but for the big five. So my path to publication, my agent, I had some good fortune. My agent is actually from my same hometown, which is Denver, Colorado. So when she was a young agent in New York, I was a young writer in New York, and we matched up then. And, you know, neither of us was really anybody, but so she's been my agent now for, I think, 2 decades, and she's come up and I've come up. So it was nice to have someone who was at the same level, and we started out together. I think it's a stroke of luck that we've that it has worked out. You know, it was kind of random at the time. But if I hadn't had a hometown connection to an agent, I have had agents approach me after I have stories published in well-known publications. So that's a good way. If you guys are seeking agents, the more publications you can get, the better. And agents they are hungry for talent. They will read, you know, the magazine One Story, certainly the New Yorker, certainly Paris Review. And when they see someone who doesn't have representation published there, they will reach out to them. The other way to pursue agents is to find out who agented the books that you love. So I think it's important to be reading a lot of contemporary fiction if that's what you want to be writing, and look in the acknowledgements. Everyone always thanks their agents. And then, so you'll know who agented the books that are well aligned with what you're doing, and then you can really target your queries to those agents. So then you can go to their website, find out their query instructions, you write them a note, you make it clear that they are not random agent number 99, but that you have contacted them because you understand their sensibility, you've done your research, and you believe genuinely that you are a good fit for them. So that would be the best path to getting an agent. And one thing I should emphasize is rejection is so rampant in this life path that you have to be so prepared for that, like so accustomed to rejection. You could get rejected by agents, by editors, by literary magazines, by MFA programs. And so just accepting and embracing the idea that you face a lot of rejection in this is really important, because if you get discouraged when you get rejected, then you won't be able to do this. You have to get rejected and not get discouraged. So my path to publishing my first book was, I did have my agent at that time. She sent this book of microfictions out to all the big publishers, and they were like, what genre is this? This book is cool in a way, but it isn't really something we would publish. So then I started looking around for small presses that might be more open to experimental work. I highly recommend the resource Poets and Writers, which is a trade publication that has a lot of information in the back of different publication prizes and contests that are happening. And so I found this tiny press, Leapfrog Press. They were having an open call for submissions as part of a contest. And I was a finalist for the contest. I didn't actually win the contest, which was disappointing. But then the editor called and said, even though you didn't win, so we aren't supposed to publish you, I fell in love with your book, so I want to publish your book. So that was my first publication, and it was you wouldn't have had to have I did have an agent, but she wasn't involved in that part of it. So small presses are a little bit different from the big five in terms of how you can get published.
Avi, I think you have some questions
Yeah.
here.
So there's two questions from the students. This one is from Jamila, and it says, "Hey professor, what advice do you have for someone who might not have an internship by the time they graduate, but is also considering grad school?"
Well, you can apply to grad school, like to an MFA program, without having had an internship. So those things they're not terribly connected, really. I think that if you are able to have some kind of internship in the literary world by the time you graduate or soon after you graduate, it is a good idea, but it's not necessary. So I think this ties into the question of the day job. So, being a writer, being a fiction writer, writing your own fiction, that is not a job that, there's no 401k, this is not a job really. So the question is, what are you going to be doing in the meantime that will give your life enough stability that you can pay your bills and write? So that could be, if you want to have that be something like working in the field, working in publishing, working for a literary magazine, then I think getting an internship in one of those fields is really important. And Jamila, who is a student of mine, we can talk about that. But One the Story is always looking for interns. I also get mailings from different publishing houses who are seeking editorial interns. So those are good ideas to do if that's how you want to be paying the bills while you are pursuing fiction writing.
And the last question from Maya is, what are your tips to making a successful letter when seeking out an agent?
So when seeking out an agent, like I said before, they get overwhelmed by a lot of submissions. So you really want to stand out. And I think the best way to stand out is to convey to the agent that you are not approaching them randomly, that you are being very deliberate, that the books that they represent really have something in common with the book that you have written. So I think that's really the most important thing. Make them understand that you have a personal connection to the work that they have done in the world. And then also when you're submitting to an agent, you will send typically you send the first 10 pages of your project. So make sure that the exciting part of your book doesn't start on page 50. Make sure that in those first 10 pages, it is engaging, it is intriguing, the language is strong, it's perfectly copy edited, so that you're really putting your best foot forward and showing your voice right away.
Really great. A lot of really amazing advice. Do you have any final advice for students that want to pursue writing a novel, writing a book?
Yes, I do. Although first I'll answer Maya's question. My class is English 4301. So that's the class that I will be teaching it next semester. So my advice is a little bit of a summary of some things I've already said. Embrace rejection. Understand that is, if you are getting rejected, you're not doing something wrong, you're doing something right. In my early days as a writer, and even this week, I put another item in. I keep an Excel spreadsheet where I write like what I applied to, where I applied, what story I applied, what date I applied, and what the result was. So this has hundreds of entries, this Excel spreadsheet, and you can just go down the list early on. It's like rejected, rejected, rejected. So I would receive a rejection. I would process it bureaucratically by putting it in the Excel spreadsheet, and then I'd forget about it. So that is one thing. I think understanding that writing a book, making a book, it's such a long process. I feel like when I was in my early 20s, I was impatient with how long it took. And now I'm much more accepting. Like, yes, I'm starting to get an idea for a book. This is going to be a 5-year journey or maybe longer, and that is completely fine. And then I think the final thing I would say is community is so important, and finding a community of readers and writers that will see you through the harder times of doing this. So in my classes here, I always encourage students to continue to meet up after the semester. Go to readings. We live in the best city in the world for going to literary readings. You could go to one every night of the week, have a writers group. Your community is so important. And then, okay, one final thing is, I would say, in a lot of moments when you're trying to make it as a fiction writer, you don't feel very powerful. You feel like you're getting rejected, like there are all these gatekeepers, like you don't know how to make headway. But the one place where you are always the emperor is in your writing itself. So in those moments where you might feel powerless in the broader world, remember that you have a lot of power as a creator. So take solace in that, those worlds that you are creating, those characters you are creating, because you are the emperor of that world.
I love that. That's so good. There's so much great advice here. I'm glad we're recording this, and then everybody can kind of go back. And then, yes, if you can, take her class. I mean, I want to take your class. This is really great, Helen. Thank you so much for your time. This is really amazing advice. This is really fantastic. Yes, English 4301. Absolutely. I really like that. I'm inspired now to pursue maybe even book writing. I've done other type of writing, but again, as writers, as we said before, we can be versatile and write different things. So, Helen, thank you so much for your time. Can students stay in touch with you other than, would it be through the email or LinkedIn or what?
I have a Brooklyn College email address, hphillips@brooklyn.cuny.edu.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much for your time. Next is Bobby Ashley, who is a writer and director of The Av, which is a web series that was on Amazon Prime. There we are, Bobby. How you doing? It's been a while.
Hello, I know it's been a minute. How are you?
Good.
How are you?
Good.
Yes.
Thank you so much for doing this.
No problem. Hope everyone is doing well on this amazing Thursday. It's beautiful outside.
Yeah, no, it is, but I'm glad that everybody's taking the time out right now to hear from really amazing, talented writers, and everybody here has this creativity about them and this talent or passion for writing.
Yes,
And
yes.
I'm glad that you're here. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I gave you a bit of an intro, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you, especially on the writing side, to pursue your career.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I always had a passion for writing. I think that stemmed from me, feeling like as a young Black queer child, feeling like I didn't have a voice in this world. And then writing allowed me to actually hone in my voice. And so once I realized that power that I had at the age of 12, I just, transcend. I just started to write more scripts, write more screenplays. I was nicknamed the kid in high school, Little Spike Lee, because he was like, hey, that's Little Spike Lee over there. He's bringing another script to us. What we going to read today, Bobby? So I just always knew that this was my calling in life. And so I just persevered and just continued writing, up until the point where I made my first short film in high school at the age of 16. I thought it was going to go to Tribeca. That didn't happen. My first rejection. Didn't know it was plenty more coming out of the pipeline. And then from there, I, went to Gutman Community College, and then I went to Brooklyn College, majored in film production, networked with my, different film students. And then while I was a junior there, I wrote and produced my first web series, The Av, which eventually started on YouTube, went to Amazon Prime, gained over 5 million streams by the time I graduated Brooklyn College, and is currently right now in 100+ countries on Amazon Prime, and is on Tubi, and I currently have a new film on Tubi, which is called Single Man Problems Volume 1. And that project was actually originally a web series that we shot. So we shot that as a web series that premiered at the New York Latino Film Festival. We got a licensing deal. My lead actor got a pre-Daytime Emmy nomination for his performance. And then eventually this year, I decided to cover the episodes into a movie format, which is on Tubi. And, one of the clips actually went viral on TikTok, 2 weeks ago, gaining over 13.5 million views. And so, yeah. And then also I wrote a pilot script, in 2020 called Hakeem. And that pilot script actually got me into I became a semi-finalist of the Sundance Episodic Lab. And that pilot script actually got me a few general meetings with executives and managers, and they, saw the vision. And then eventually it really pivoted me into writing movie treatments, in which I just sent one off to an executive 2 days ago. So, so I say that to say, the writing journey from 12 to now has been very interesting, yet but very appreciative. So yeah.
No, but absolutely amazing stuff. Wow. Really amazing engagement, visibility, and you're in it, right? You're
Mhm.
making it happen. So you have to be in it to win it.
Mhm.
You're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about some of that, I mean, it gave me goosebumps because I've known you for so many years, and it's really well deserved, and you really are dedicated to your craft, and
Yes.
hard work
Yes.
does pay off.
It sure
so glad.
does. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it sure does. Yes.
So we have a couple of questions, obviously. So,
Mhm.
in terms of your writing process, we were talking earlier about, people's writing process. How long does it take them to write their book or their screenplay?
Mhm.
What's your process like in terms of how long does it take to write the screenplay, and what's your process? How do you get inspired to write it?
Oh, well, I pull the inspiration I pull from personal experiences, most of the time in my writing. I'll say for the Hakeem pilot script, I come from a family of 7 siblings. So my last 3 little siblings, I'm like, what's the relationship between me and them? And then that's how I created the Hakeem pilot. It took me, I'll say, if you're personally writing something, you can, without any deadlines. And if you first starting out, let me say this, if you're first starting out, and you just want to test your water, see my write screenplay, give yourself grace because, for me, when I first started out, oh my gosh, it took me a minute. It had to take me like 1 to 2 years to finish a screenplay. But now that I have trained myself into like, okay, Bobby, when we start a project, make sure you attach a deadline, because when you are in these rooms, meeting with these executives, meeting with the production companies, they will give you a deadline. You may be assigned to write a script, that they need in like a month or two. And then you have to go off, write that script and rewrites and stick to those deadlines. I know in TV is a quick turnaround. You may receive an outline on Monday, but they need a draft by next week Monday, or they need a draft by Friday, because TV is so quick. By next week they're prepping the episode, and then by the week after they're shooting it, and then it's in post. So it all depends. I always tell people, before starting out, give yourself grace. Try to figure out what type of stories you want to tell, how you want to approach the stories. But as you continue to hone your skills, as you continue to, pivot in this business, now start to train yourself to attach deadlines. Even if it's a personal screenplay that you want to write, tell yourself, okay, I want to write, the script, I want to write it before Thanksgiving. So I'm giving myself that time to, outline, less time spending with friends, more time, in the cave, knocking that script out. So yeah, that's how, I went from, writing just off the fly to attaching those deadlines, because it's very important.
It's an interesting point because I know that sometimes we had spoke earlier about writer's block, and sometimes demand or deadlines can facilitate writer's block. But I think also in your case with the industry and how fast it moves,
Yes.
and do you feel like the deadlines fuel you to write and stay on point?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does. It definitely, at first I was scared. I was like, ooh, deadlines. Oh my gosh, like what's going on here? But I had to pull, honestly, I had to pull into my college experience. I'm like, listen, hey, we had deadlines in film school where we had to complete a film or we had to complete an essay by this time. And if it wasn't in, we will be in trouble. So I had to pull into that bag and say, you know what, I'm gonna apply the tools I learned in college into this industry because it both go hand in hand. So yeah, deadlines really fueled me to stay on top of my assignments, stay on top of, the notes, stay on top of having those meetings, with the executives and going over what works, what doesn't work, and just staying on top of everything. And just having balance, knowing, okay, this is time to write, this is time to spend time with family, this is time to spend time with friends, and this is time for myself, to mentally prepare myself to make sure like, okay, I'm ready to get this done because mentally, my mental health is on the right track and I'm ready to knock this out. So it's all about balance. And how do you balance those deadlines? It's definitely key.
That's a great point. Great point. And also just knowing the industry, knowing the
Knowing
industry
the
that you're
industry,
writing. Yeah.
exactly.
When it comes to the entertainment media industry and you're writing this IP, this content that's going to
Mhm.
go and have a turnaround time of production,
Mhm.
yeah, you just have to
Yeah,
know about
you
the
have to.
deadline.
Yeah, you have to know, and you have to know what's out there in the market. You have to know if you are, let's say, for example, I have Tubi. I know Tubi get flacked, but they do anything as far as original content is concerned. And I was just talking to the VP of original programming there, and I said, "Hey, what you the market is? What's the market now?" She said, "Well, the market is more so black thrillers, and we're looking for more docs, and we're looking for black thrillers, more docs, and more LGBTQ plus." So I'm like, okay, cool, noted. So now, which led me to writing that treatment. And I'm like, well, hey, I have a treatment for the market. And she's like, oh, okay, cool. So it just always asking those questions. Like if you want to have a meeting, once you network yourself, when you want to have a meeting, it's okay to ask a question like, what are you guys looking for now? Or if you don't want to ask, check their library, see what's trending, see what they're pushing through, so you can know as a writer, okay, I know if I want to just solely sell this, I know what to sell, So yeah,
Really great. Stay informed, obviously, about
stay
the
informed.
industry.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. What's trending? Absolutely.
Hmm.
Avi, you have a few questions for Bobby, and then we have some questions. Well, we have a question in the chat. If you have any questions, everyone, please add that there.
So you spoke about, the life experiences that help develop the story,
Hmm.
but a question I want to know is how do you develop the characters?
Hmm. Well, I always ask myself these four questions. First of all, never, because I made this mistake, never write passive characters, always write active characters. We want to know what do your character want? What's the goal? Every movie you watch, your character is after something. If they're not after something, your protagonist, then the story is just gonna be flat. What's standing in their way? Sometimes it could be him versus him versus Martha, him versus nature, those things. The need. What do they need to learn by the end of the story? Which goes back to the thematic question. And the thematic question is what question are you asking not only your protagonist, but you're asking the whole story. So asking for the whole story. So for example, my pilot Hakeem, the thematic question with that pilot was, does success of any sort bring true happiness? Because the character Hakeem wants to pursue a career and he wants to become an international comedian. He wants that success, but he has an strained relationship with his siblings. Throughout the series, he learned via that thematic question, via the need, that the true happiness stems from having a strong, solid foundation with your family. So those are the questions I ask myself every time I approach a character, and also remind myself that I don't make like, you know, perfect characters, because humans are not perfect. You know, we all aren't perfect. So honestly, characters are just the human, you know, you just write in the human experience, you know, so the good, the bad, it just all blend into one. So that's how I approach my characters. I always ask those questions and make sure that they're always after something, what's standing in their way. Even the antagonist, everybody think the antagonist, oh, that's the bad guy, that's the bad woman, oh my God, they're just horrible. But I'm like, what's their story? You know, and even like when I watched Black Panther, the first one, and it was Killmonger, and we understood why he was doing why he did what he did. You know, it wasn't just, oh, I just want to take revenge. It was like, no, I'm doing this because this what happened in my life, that trauma. So again, going back to the whole human experience, because we always ask ourselves, what's the why? What is that why? Like, why is this person doing what they're doing? Why are they acting out this way? Like, what is happening? What happened in their life or in their childhood that is triggering them to react this way? And that's how you really sink your teeth into your characters. So you become a therapist. One thing I learned taking a Shonda Rhimes masterclass, she said, become your own character's therapist and ask your characters these questions so you can know, like, wow, okay, we have work to do. And how we gonna get the work done is throughout the story. That's how we're gonna get the work done. So yeah.
That's
I love that. Yeah, I love
Yes.
that. That's great. Um, as life goes on, you know, ideas, you
Mhm.
may have a new inspiration about things. How much do the screenplays usually change during filming?
Oh, okay. Well, oh, that's so funny. Me and my editor were just talking about this because we were saying, like, you know, movies, the final draft is in post-production, you know, because let's say I can have a script and then we do a table read and then we may get notes and then, you know, actors may be on set and they're like, hey Bobby, can I ad lib this? Oh, this line ain't coming out right. I'm like, all right, go ahead, let's see what you're doing. And then you know, we'll get to post-production. We may leave something on the cutting room floor. So the script is always changing every time around. What you had in pre-production, you may not have in post-production. Of course, you want to have the story, the foundation, but certain dialogue, certain things you want to move around. You know, maybe you wrote a script that's full of dialogue, and when you got on set, you're like, you know what? Let's toss this out. I want silence in the scene. That actually happened. I actually directed a scene, and it was just a lot of dialogue. I'm like, well, these two characters are not getting along. I want to actually show them, you know, not getting along by, you know, just, you know, giving each other just that silent treatment. You know, and they could say, hey, hi, blah, blah, but just be very subtle with it. So yeah, the script is always changing. That's one thing I had to get used to, because you have to detach yourself from your baby, you know, because you just never know, you know, in this industry, everything is changing. So of course the script is going to change. You could be on set and, you know, they may be like, listen, talent isn't really liking this, so we have to find a way to switch the dialogue around. So the writers are huddling together, trying to come up with the next, you know, dialogue that can really move the story, and then hand off to talent. So yeah, the script is, you know, don't get attached. I say it to say, don't get attached, because things are always changing.
That
Yeah.
is great. That's a super important point,
Mhm.
especially when we're writing screenplays and
Mhm.
pilots and whatnot. You cannot
Mhm.
get that attached.
You can't.
Because when you do, it's tough.
It's tough to let go. Trust me, I've been there. I was like, no, what do you mean? This makes sense. And they're like, no, Bobby, it doesn't make sense. This
The
is why
dreaded notes. The
Yeah.
dreaded notes.
All the notes. All the notes. That's one thing. Get used to taking lots of notes. You're gonna get notes from executives. You're gonna get notes if you do table reads. I hear your words. It's tough to hear your words. It's okay. You know, you may be like, what was I thinking when I wrote this? It's fine. You're gonna get notes from actors, producers. As a writer, you're gonna continuously receive notes after notes after notes. But guess what? That just, you know, that's just adding and just few, you know, you're just becoming a better writer, or just becoming a better writer as you receive notes and as you apply those notes. 'Cause that's another thing. Executives want to see, how can you apply notes? Because they'll give you like the most vague note, and you'd be like, okay, what does this mean? But it's okay to ask, okay, can we sync our TVs? What do you mean by X, Y, and Z? And then if, you know, something blah blah, now you're like, okay, now you gotta go off and figure it out. Like in this problem solving, like, okay, what does he mean? The stakes, is not raised enough in Act 2, but when we get to Act 3, it's there. So it's like, what happened in Act 2 that's not raising the stakes enough? So yeah.
Yeah, it's very good points. All the super valuable insight. We have just time for maybe 2 more questions, and then we have our final speaker. So, Bobby, there's a question from Skylar. Yes, who's asking, what's a key takeaway that young Black men and women should know when it comes to being on a writing journey?
Well, I will say the main takeaway is knowing your voice, knowing how to stick up for your voice, and knowing that a lot of people aren't going to understand your voice. But guess what? As long as you know it, as long as you truly believe in yourself, and as long as you truly believe in your writing, that is going to really move you forward, because folks are looking for the next generation of voices who know what they're doing. So for me, it took me a minute to step into the lane of, okay, this is a Black queer voice, and these are the stories that I want to tell, blah, 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 blah. And so, and the industry wasn't ready for that, when I was like 24, 25, they weren't ready. But I stuck to it, and I was like, this is me. I can't be another version of someone else. I could be the only best version of myself. So that's how I navigated through those spaces and let them know, like, listen, these are the stories that I'm telling. This is all I want to tell. What we doing? And some may understand, some may not understand. And then this is why I always tell people, if they don't get it, cool, go out there and shoot it yourself. Go out there and, network with people who understand your voice, and shoot it and just put it out there visually. So now they're going to circle back like, oh, this was the project you were talking about. Yes. But again, just sticking to your voice, because that's one thing it cannot duplicate, is that authentic storytelling of yours.
Great. And then we have one more question from OG. Have you ever been in a situation where you had creative differences with other screenwriters on a script and you're all working together?
Yes. Me and my writing partner, Robert McKello, I remember when we wrote, it was Single Man Problems, and we was writing a PrEP episode, and which is very, we was talking about HIV and PrEP, and that was a very touchy topic we was touching on. And he wrote something in the script, and I looked at him. I was like, "Oh, no, we're not doing that." And then he was like, "Well, excuse me." He's like, "But why not? This is, this we have, we have to talk about it." I said, "Well, Robert, I don't know if we go there. We're just having creative differences, but we found the common ground by saying, you know what." I had to stop myself and say, no, it's me who's afraid to go there. Robert wants to go there, but at the time, I didn't want to go there. But he's telling me, no, we have to, because we're being a disservice if we don't go there and we don't really be honest with what we're saying. And I said, you know what, you're right. So sometimes it's that fear of, oh, are we going a little bit too far now? It's like, if we not, then I'm sorry. If we not, then, what are we doing? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, adaptability and really thinking about, the collaborative process and, so, Bobby, thank you so much for your time. This was really great, fantastic advice. There is one more question. If you have a few minutes, maybe Patrick Hercules, who I work with, again, great question that he has, but, again, thank you so much for your time, sharing this advice and insight, and continue to do this great work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm proud of you, man.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So again, thank you. How could they stay in touch with you? Would it be through LinkedIn, or is there an email?
Yes. You can find me on LinkedIn. So Bobby Ashley, send me an invite. I'm gonna accept it. You can take my email down, bobbyashley56@gmail.com. By next year, it's gonna be different, because after production company stuff on, being locked in. And if you are a social media person, I will go put my social media out there because I am a millennial. You can follow me at I am Bobby Ashley on Instagram and connect with me. I would love to connect with you all. You know, if you have any questions, please let me know. I am here.
Bobby's great. I know him when he was a student, and the fact that you're here chatting with students, amazing stuff. So yeah, everybody
Thank
really,
you.
it's not only what you know, it's who you know. So
That part, networking is extremely important in developing those genuine relationships. That's what's going to get you further in the game. Yeah.
thank you again, Bobby. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys.
Okay, and we have Allison Rapp, who is an assistant editor at the Ultimate Classic Rock and an alum of Brooklyn College and an alum of Magner Career Center. So thank you so much for being here today
Thank you
and
for
sharing
having
some
me.
advice.
All right, thanks for staying late, everybody.
Sorry about that. Yeah, but again, it's all such great advice, and you guys can kind of stick around to 2:15 or past. It'll be great. And Allison, so let's just hop right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to go into writing?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I should probably maybe work backwards from where I am now. Right now I'm a full-time assistant editor at a place called Ultimate Classic Rock, which, as its title obviously suggests, covers a lot of classic rock artists, legacy acts, older musicians in the industry. I graduated from Brooklyn College in December of 2020, which was kind of mid-pandemic, so to speak. As Michael said, I worked for the Magner Center for, oh my God, I think it was 3 whole years, maybe. It was a long time. And as we also mentioned before, like Derek, I worked for the campus newspaper. I worked for the Vanguard for the whole time that I think since my freshman year of college. I moved to New York City specifically to go to Brooklyn College and attend the journalism program. Derek mentioned before, there used to be 2 programs. There used to be a print track as well as like a multimedia track, and I was part of the print track, one of the last cohorts of those people. So I specifically came to Brooklyn College for that degree path, got the degree, wrote for the Vanguard for 3 years, and when I graduated in December 2020, I was not anticipating on being a full-time freelancer, but that was what happened, and that was how it ended up. I mean, obviously people were stuck inside, so there was a lot of remote work happening. But I had actually started freelancing while I was still in college, and I was still writing for the Vanguard. So I was kind of slowly but surely building up that portfolio. A lot of it was arts and culture writing. A lot of it was music writing. A lot of it was writing that I did for either free or for very, very little money. I will add that probably a number of times in this conversation. And I started actually freelancing for Ultimate Classic Rock. I guess it was the summer of 2021. And I was just kind of putting bits and pieces on the website here and there, which led to them offering me a couple of news shifts per week, which then led to them offering me a full-time job. And that's where I've been for the last, I think it's been 2 years now that I've been a full-timer there. So yeah, that's kind of how I've ended up in this position.
But you're also a bit of a musician, and you have this passion for music as well, right? So
Dabbling, I'd call it dabbling. I mean, I tell people all the time that I got into, when I first came to Brooklyn College, I did not at all in any way, shape, or form assume that I was going to go into music journalism specifically. If anything, I actually felt the opposite. I saw someone actually in the chat earlier talk about this, like asking whether or not they should pursue a specific beat straight away or if they should be looking for that now. And when I came to Brooklyn College, I was actually adamantly against that. I thought I need to be as versatile as I possibly can. We've used that word a lot today. When I came to Brooklyn College, that was 2017. We were in the era of fake news, and there was a lot of, the reputation of the industry was changing a lot then. It still is. And to me, I thought I really need to be as flexible and malleable in this industry as I possibly can, and kind of be able to cover hard-hitting local news just as easily as I can cover, some sort of arts feature piece of some kind. And then I took the feature magazine writing course at Brooklyn College. I don't know if that's what it's still called, but my professor had us all write. We had to make our own magazines, and he wanted us to write a review of something. Could be anything: book, movie, restaurant, whatever. And I chose an album, and I wrote an album review for like the first time, and I loved it, and I thought it was super fun, and I wanted to do more of that. And then I actually studied abroad when I was a sophomore or junior rather. And while I was away, my editor-in-chief at the Vanguard very kindly allowed me to have my own weekly column at the Vanguard called On the Record, in which I discussed you know, my experience studying abroad, as well as some like contemporary music criticism, which hence the On the Record title. And so I got a lot more experience doing that. And then, like I said, I was freelancing on the side as well. So my music portfolio kind of built from there. But what I tell people all the time is like, I got into this specific beat because I'm a music fan and because I've been a music nut since I was a kid, and being able to combine those two things into one career is a blessing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Do what you love, right? So, I mean, very important. How do you incorporate multimedia elements such as photos, videos, interactive graphics into your stories?
Yeah, I mean, obviously photos and videos are a huge part of like my day-to-day news stories that I write. You know, we are obviously always trying to have photos from whatever event it is that we're covering. You know, if it's a concert that happened the previous night, we're always, of course, trying to get photos that were taken specifically at that concert. Videos, I mean, we are constantly culling from YouTube. That's one of the most amazing things about YouTube, is that there are a lot of music fans out there who love to post. I mean, we've all done it. We've all taken videos at concerts and then posted them places for our friends to see. And a lot of those end up on YouTube. So we're always like pulling things from YouTube that other people have posted up there. Because I mean, like myself, a lot of our readers, if they see that you can watch a video in a certain story about a certain band, certain concert, you're more likely to click and read an article that includes that kind of media. I am primarily a writer for Ultimate Classic Rock and an editor, but I also do a lot of work with our social media, our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Obviously we post all of our stories there, but lately, especially in the last, like, I'd say 6 months to a year or so, we've been really pushing for, you know, having a little bit more of an engagement presence on those apps. You know, and it can be simple things like asking our readers, like, what's an album that you play with no skips, or like, what band do you wish would get back together, or, you know, different things like that, just to get people continually like scrolling through our feeds. We'll also pull social media posts from band members themselves and put them into articles that we write. We're definitely trying to utilize as many of those tools as possible. And we also have, you know, if we'll write a news story, let's say it's a story about like Paul McCartney, for example, we have specific tags for each of our artists and hyperlinks that we'll put throughout a piece. So you can click on Paul McCartney's name specifically, and it'll take you to an entire page of ours that has nothing but articles about Paul McCartney. So we do try to make our site as interactive as we possibly can, so that readers are clicking on more stories, spending more time on our site.
That's great. That's great. Avi, you have some questions as well.
Hi, Allison. How do you balance the needs of your audience with the goal of your media outlet or editorial team?
This is tough. And we've had, it's funny, a number of conversations within my little work chat lately about this very idea, because obviously, you know, we want to be as inclusive and as broad in our coverage as we possibly can, while also recognizing that, you know, we need a certain amount of numbers to, you know, reach our quotas, that kind of thing. And for us specifically, it boils down really to us figuring out and keeping track of which artists and which bands and which names do the best for us. We have learned over the course of many months, many years, which bands are more likely to get clicks for us, and we'll kind of try to focus our efforts perhaps more on those bands. Or really making sure that we're keeping abreast of whatever it is that they're doing. So, you know, like, for example, if we have a story about like Jimi Hendrix and the Eagles, we'll probably focus more on the Eagles. The Eagles tend to do really well for us. We get a lot of clicks. We get a lot of people sharing articles like that. Not that we are not going to cover somebody like Jimi Hendrix, but we are really paying close attention to which artists our following seems to want to read the most. And obviously, you know, that helps our higher ups above see that, you know, the numbers are being kept up that way.
That's great. That's great. We have some questions in the chat. So if anybody has any questions, add them to the chat. Sarah asks, I heard online that no one hires photojournalists anymore because they'd rather have a writer with a cell phone. Is that true based on your experience?
I don't know if it's true so much as, I mean, because I've been on both sides of that. Like, I have been the writer with the cell phone down in the pit taking pictures of the band. And I have also been the writer at concerts where there's 25 different journalists in front of the stage, or photojournalists rather, I mean, taking photographs. I've been in certain positions even where I've been to, like, for example, last month I went to Willie Nelson and they told me specifically, they said, we have our own in-house photographer. We have our own Willie Nelson photographer. They will take photos. They will send it to you. You don't have to, do that at all. In fact, we ask you not to. So there are certain circumstances like that. Obviously, that's a pretty, popular example, but I mean, I have a lot of rock photographer friends and people who do this on a regular basis in the industry. And, the other thing too is that because we are all, kind of scattered throughout the country, it's like I can't be at a show in Los Angeles. I can't go take pictures at a show in Los Angeles. So obviously, they have photographers at shows out there, and those photographs are getting circulated to publications, nationally, internationally. So I don't think that's true any more than, they're not hiring writers or they're not hiring editors. I think it's just a case by case basis.
Great. Avi, there's, I believe, another question in the chat.
The last question is from Skylar, and it says, "Hi, Allison. What's a key takeaway you have when you are pursuing multiple passions and being versatile? How do you keep moving forward if your path changes?"
That's a good question. I mean, I think for me personally, and Helen kind of talked about this a little bit, is like being willing to work positions that are maybe not like at the top of your list in terms of what you want to be doing. I mean, when I graduated and was the full-time freelancer that I was, and still, I was able to have these clips that made me really happy and do this work that really felt fulfilling to me. But I was a personal assistant for somebody who ran their own wedding planning business. And I did some work for a COVID-19 nonprofit. And I did all sorts of other odds and end jobs that afforded me to be able to do those other things that really made me happy at the end of the day. And so I think kind of letting go of the idea that you need to work at a certain publication or have a certain title in order to consider yourself a writer. You can be a writer no matter what. And, sort of understanding that no matter what your day job is, so to speak, you're a writer through and through.
Again, this is a passion. This is something that everybody loves to do. If you're a writer, you're going to do it. You're going to write no matter what. And the last question, which is a combination of two, actually. So Niana is asking, and this touches upon what you had mentioned before, what is the way to combine your two passions together? For example, if you love movies and writing, and of course, this is where we talked about the music part. And then if you have any final advice for students overall as a writer.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of combining passions, it's hard because for me, like those two parts of my life are always so blended together that it's difficult for me to imagine them separately. I mean, I think for me, it was mostly a matter of like continuing to do the same things that I was doing. I was still going to concerts and I was still following certain music writers on my social media, and I was reading a lot of their work, and I was going to the same events that they were going to. I think it does take a certain sense of bravery to combine something that you maybe don't necessarily think is all that sustainable in the long run, with, your own personal passion. But I mean, in a certain sense, you do, and again, Helen talked about this, you have to be willing to be rejected and willing to fail sometimes, and understand that, this being a writer is not a linear path by any stretch of the imagination. In terms of advice that I would say, two things definitely stand out to me. One, that I've told people before, is definitely reach out to the writers that you like and the writers that you find are doing the best work. If you read a certain piece and you like it a lot, or a certain book or whatever it is, try to maybe find their email address or their Twitter or something like that. I can't tell you how many people I know to this day, friends of mine, who I just DM'd and was like, hey man, I really liked this piece of writing. And, I can remember a couple of times there were instances where the writer wrote back and said, thank you so much. Like, I looked at your portfolio and you're doing some really cool stuff like that. So definitely people are more open to communicating with people lower in the industry than you think that they are often. And even when they're not, they probably aren't the kind of people that maybe you want to be associating with anyway. And then also, and this is probably a like post-pandemic thing that I have thought more and more about, is looking up what the certain people that you admire in your industry look like. We do a lot of emailing back and forth with people, or we do a lot of, just like reading plain text, but I can't tell you how many times now I've been at a show and somebody has come up and introduced themselves to me and they're like, oh my God, you're so-and-so. And I don't recognize them because I have no idea what they look like. And we've been emailing for weeks and I have no clue what they look like, or vice versa. There have been multiple instances where I've been at events and I've recognized like a Rolling Stone writer or somebody else that I admire. And I've gone up to them just because I've recognized their face and I know who it is. And then I can go up to them and say, hi, I'm Allison, blah, 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 blah. So just kind of keeping your ears and eyes open at all times and knowing what people look like and being willing to approach them and introduce yourself is a huge, huge thing.
This kind of ties into a question, which is about how to find freelancing gigs, and obviously it's who you know, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so-and-so knows so-and-so who knows so-and-so. I mean, I got my job, actually, funny. A friend of mine who works in an entirely different like freelance field, she mostly does like culture and travel writing, had gotten this PR pitch from Gibson Guitars, and she forwarded it to me and she said, I can't do anything with this, can you? And I said, well, I don't know. And I took that pitch and I pitched UCR for the very first time with that pitch that hadn't even been sent to me at first. And they wrote me back and said, hey, we can't do anything with this idea, but would you be interested in writing something else for us? Because we really liked your portfolio when we liked your email. So it really is just a matter of kind of building that Rolodex, although they don't use Rolodexes anymore, but building that portfolio of contacts that you have so that, someone can maybe point you in a different direction.
Rolodex, what's that? I like the reference. I like that.
I had a lot of old professors at Brooklyn College. There were some
Yes.
Rolodexes.
Oh yeah, I know. I guess, and let's end on this last part, which is, are there any stories that you wrote that really stand out to you, or is a favorite of yours?
Oh, wow, this is crazy. Okay, well, I think the one that stands out to me the most that I, kind of got this whole thing started for me was when I was first starting to freelance. I was just kind of like making it up as I went along or whatever. And again, writing pieces for like $25. And I happened to email this guitarist who used to, be in this band in the 60s or whatever. And I had emailed him and I was like, hey, I saw you have a new record coming out. Like, I'd love to talk or whatever. Like, if we could do an interview about the album, that'd be really cool. And he said, oh, okay, like, could we do it in person? And he was in England. And I was like, no, we can't do it in person. Turned out I went abroad to Scotland and I went to the UK and I spent a semester there and I spent a whole weekend. I took the train down from Scotland down to the south of England and had an entire day with this guitarist, and we had lunch together and did a whole interview. And it was my first time doing this sort of in-person, face-to-face, interview in a way that I had obviously never done before. And I realized how much I loved connecting with people on a personal level like that. And it solidified for me right then that this was something that I wanted to make a career out of. And again, it all happened because I just, shot my shot, so to speak. And I think that's a huge part of what this industry is. If you're not willing to shoot that shot, if you're not willing to take that risk, then, chances are you probably won't end up very far. But if you are, there's a lot out there.
Right. You gotta be in it to win it, as they say. So, definitely take the shot for sure, and not feel guilty that I could have, I should have, what if I would have. Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Allison. A lot of really great advice, a lot of great advice from everybody here, and I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of some of the others, all the others that were here today that just gave such amazing advice and insight to pursue their passion in writing. So I hope students walk away with, some real inspiration, some real insight. Allison, can they stay in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't use it a ton. My email is my first and last name, AllisonRap22@gmail.com. You can also, I'm on Twitter at AllisonRap22. Definitely feel free to write me if you've got any other questions.
Okay, no, I think that's really great. I think, again, take advantage. It's who's in your network, and take a lot of these insights and these best practices. Take all those into consideration for sure. As you go and you develop your career as a writer. So, Avi, thank you so much. Great work today. This is your first time co-hosting an event, so fantastic work. And
Thank you, thank you.
yes, yes. And for all the students that are here, you can come and see us at Magner Center. You can make an appointment with me through Navigate. You can email me directly. You guys probably got my email, msarah@brooklyn.cuny.edu. And I hope to see you guys at another event. We have that information on the portal, or follow Magner Center on Instagram. We're putting a lot of content on there. Avi's doing it. Ize, who's someone else that works on social media here at Magner. Definitely follow us, and we hope to see you at another event in the future. Enjoy the rest of the day, everyone. Take
Thank you,
care.
guys.